Most boat owners think fuel prices are the problem. They're not. The real problem is how much fuel you pay for. That never becomes distance. It gets burned up by normal habits nobody corrects at the dock or at the pump. And the worst part, some of those habits don't just waste fuel. They slowly wear out pumps, injectors, props, and power heads until the failure feels random. So the real question isn't what gas costs. It's how much you're donating every trip without realizing it. In this video, I'm breaking down 10 fuel-saving secrets for boats and outboards. Some are obvious once you hear them, a few are quietly controversial, and at least one will explain why your fuel hog might not be the engine at all, but everything wrapped around it. Number 10. Paying extra for the wrong fuel grade. Most people standing at a pump or fuel dock are trying to do the right thing. When you care about your engine, it feels logical to reach for the most expensive option. The word premium sounds like protection, cleanliness, and longevity all rolled into one. And because nobody stops to explain otherwise, that assumption quietly sticks. What rarely gets said out loud is that premium is not a measure of quality. It is a measure of octane, and octane is simply resistance to knock-in engines designed to operate under higher compression or stress. It does not mean the fuel is cleaner. It does not mean it burns more efficiently in every engine. And it does not automatically translate into better fuel economy. Most modern 4-stroke and many direct injected 2-stroke outboards are engineered to run on standard pump gasoline. Their ignition timing, compression, and fuel mapping are built around that requirement. If the manual specifies regular fuel, using a higher octane does not unlock extra performance. In many cases, the engine management system does not adjust at all because there is nothing it needs to correct. There are legitimate exceptions. Some high performance designs require higher octane to avoid detonation, and manufacturers are very clear about that. The problem is not premium fuel itself. The problem is using it when it is not required, simply because it feels safer. The quiet cost shows up over time. A few extra cents per unit does not feel like much in the moment, but across a season it can easily add up to hundreds of dollars with no measurable benefit. Same speed, same reliability, same range. Once you stop overpaying for each fill, it naturally raises another question. Not just what fuel you buy, but what condition it is in when it finally reaches your tank. Number 9. Fueling when the tanks are being disturbed. When storage tanks are refilled, everything inside them gets stirred up. Sediment that normally sits undisturbed at the bottom can mix back into the fuel. Moisture, rust particles, and microbial residue can all become suspended, even though the fuel coming out of the nozzle looks perfectly clear. In a car, slightly. Contaminated fuel might only shorten the life of a filter. On a boat, especially one running modern electronic fuel injection, the consequences can be more immediate. Hard starting, uneven idle, or sudden power loss often trace back to contamination introduced during a bad fill. Water is the biggest risk. Boats already live in humid environments, and once water enters the fuel system, it becomes difficult to ignore. Many owners only discover the issue when they drain a separator and see cloudy layers or debris at the bottom. At that point, the damage may already be underway. The solution is not technical or expensive, it is situational awareness. If you see active deliveries, equipment movement, or signs that fuel has just been transferred, patience is the cheapest protection you can buy. Waiting a little longer allows everything to settle back where it belongs. Paying attention to what comes out of the nozzle leads straight to another issue: how everyday fueling habits quietly turn a simple fill-up into a much bigger risk than most boaters realize. Number 8. Pushing every fill up to the extremes. On land, many drivers wait until the tank is nearly empty, then fill it to the brim. It feels efficient, fewer stops, maximum range. On a boat, that same routine quietly creates two different problems, both of which waste fuel and shorten component life. Running consistently near empty stresses parts that were never meant to operate dry. Marine fuel pumps often rely on surrounding fuel for cooling and lubrication. When levels stay low, the pump works harder, runs hotter, and becomes more vulnerable to premature failure. What looks like saving fuel can end with a repair bill that erases those savings instantly. The opposite extreme brings its own issues. Forcing extra fuel in after the nozzle shuts off leaves that liquid with nowhere to go. It can push into vent lines or vapor systems that were only designed to handle fumes. On boats, spilled fuel can collect in confined spaces, creating both waste and safety concerns. There is a practical middle ground. Keeping the tank within a healthy operating range and stopping at the first firm cutoff avoids both stress and spillage. It also reduces evaporation loss and minimizes the chance of venting raw fuel overboard. This approach does not require new equipment or complicated procedures. It is simply a shift in habit. Over time, it protects the most expensive parts of the fuel system while preserving fuel that would otherwise disappear unnoticed. And even when fuel is bought carefully and carried responsibly, what happens next depends heavily on one small, often overlooked component further down the line. A lot of these habits sound small until you hear how differently other boaters operate. Some swear by certain routines, others learned the hard way after a bad season. If you've had a fuel-related surprise, good or bad, share it in the comments. Someone else watching might avoid an expensive mistake because of it. And if you want more videos that cut through dock talk and focus on what actually affects outboards long-term, liking and subscribing is the best way to support that. Number 7. Treating filtration as an economy system, not just protection. If you talk to mechanics who work on outboards every day, you will hear a pattern. Many of the "it just started running badly" stories begin at the fuel filter. Yet owners often think of filters and fuel water separators as an afterthought, something to change when there is time, rather than as a key part of keeping consumption under control. The engine on your transom is constantly making small adjustments based on what it sees through its sensors. When fuel flow is restricted, when water makes it past the separator, or when debris starts blocking injectors, the control unit is forced to compensate. That compensation rarely makes the motor more efficient. Instead, it can lead to richer mixtures, incomplete combustion, and small but persistent drops in the distance you get from each gallon. You may not notice a dramatic stumble, just a gradual feeling that the boat is thirstier than it used to be. A good spin-on filter or remote fuel water separator is a relatively inexpensive part compared with a set of injectors or a high-pressure pump. Changing it on a regular schedule and cutting one open now and then to see what it has been catching turns it into an early warning system. If you run in areas where fuel quality is questionable, or if your boat sits for long periods, being proactive here is not optional. That little canister is the barrier between whatever the station sold you and the fine passages inside your outboard. The fuel you do not waste fighting through a clogged system is only part of the payoff. When the engine is breathing properly and getting clean, consistent supply, it can run closer to its intended calibration. That means the power you expect at a given throttle opening, which in practice means you are less tempted to push the lever further forward to maintain speed. Of course, filtration can only do so much if the liquid in your tank is slowly changing into something your engine was never designed to burn. That is where a widely misunderstood ingredient comes in, especially on boats that spend more time tied up than moving. Number 6. Respecting ethanol and storage instead of ignoring them. For many owners, fuel is something you think about the day you use the boat and forget about as soon as you're back at the dock. Unfortunately, the chemistry keeps going long after you pull the key. Blends that include alcohol behave differently from traditional gasoline, particularly in environments where moisture and temperature swings are normal. Few places fit that description better than a boat, sitting in a slip or on a trailer through changing weather. Over time, fuel that contains a percentage of ethanol tends to attract water in a sealed and frequently used system that can be managed. In a partly filled tank that breathes with every temperature change, the risk goes up. The result can be a layer of alcohol-rich liquid, changes in octane, and corrosion in components that were meant to see clean, dry fuel. That will not only reduce reliability, it can also hurt your economy as the motor struggles with a less predictable mixture. The most effective strategies are not complicated. If you have access to ethanol-free fuel and you know the boat will sit, that is often worth the small price difference. If you do not, then treating the fuel with a stabilizer formulated for blended gasoline and avoiding very long storage periods on a half-empty tank makes a real difference. Using the boat regularly is more than fun. It is maintenance. Seen in this light, fuel management is not just about saving a few dollars per trip. It is about avoiding the slow slide into mystery problems that waste both fuel and weekends. Once the liquid in the tank is fresh, clean, and protected, the next place to look is how your engine is being loaded every time you leave the no-wake zone. Number 5. Letting the propeller match what the engine was designed to do. Ask around at a busy dock, and you will hear people brag about top speed or how hard their boat jumps on plane. What you hear less often is someone talking about the revolutions per minute. Their engine reaches at full throttle with a normal load. That quiet number is one of the most important for fuel economy, yet it is frequently ignored when props are swapped for more speed or a more aggressive feel. Every outboard is built with a recommended full throttle engine speed range. If you never check whether your setup allows the engine to spin into that window, you may be forcing it to work outside its happy place. When a propeller is too tall for the boat and load, the motor struggles, the revs stay low even with the control lever wide open, and the internal stress goes up. That is called lugging, and it is a reliable way to burn more fuel per mile, while also shortening the life of the powerhead. On the other hand, if the propeller is too small or too lightly pitched, the engine can over-rev, which also moves it away from its most efficient zone. The key is balance. With a typical load of passengers, gear, and fuel, you take the boat into open water, gradually work up to full throttle, and see where the tachometer settles. If the number is well below or above the range recommended in the manual, the propeller needs to be reconsidered. Once you find a match, something interesting happens. The same cruising speed now requires less throttle opening, because the engine and the propeller are working together efficiently instead of fighting each other. Over a season of normal use, that difference can quietly save you far more than the cost of the correct wheel. When the propeller and engine are finally speaking the same language, the next lever is how the hull and the motor are actually meeting the water, second by second, every time you climb onto plane. Number 4, using trim and hull cleanliness as your real economy mode. Many boats spend most of their lives dragging far more surface area through the water than necessary. The hull is running bow high, the stern is digging a trench, and the owner wonders why it feels like they are constantly pushing into a wall. That heavy feeling at the controls often shows up as a bigger fuel bill, and the cure is not a magic device. It is basic setup and operator feel. Trim is how you change the angle of the outboard relative to the transom and the water. Too far tucked in, and the bow stays down, plowing through chop and wasting energy. Too far out, and the propeller can ventilate, lose grip, and force you to reduce throttle to regain control. Somewhere between those extremes is a position where the hull lifts, the wetted area shrinks, and the boat begins to skim instead of shove. That is where fuel economy improves. A dirty bottom quietly ruins that effort. Growth, scum, and roughness along the hull create extra drag that no amount of careful trimming can fully overcome. Two boats with identical engines and fuel loads can have completely different miles per gallon if one has a freshly cleaned and properly painted hull, and the other has been sitting in warm water for months. Owners sometimes blame the motor for using more fuel than last year, when the real difference is half a season of slime. The habit to build is simple. Learn the sound and feel of the hull when it frees up. As you accelerate, trim out until the boat feels light and the spray line moves aft. Then bring it slightly back in if it starts to bounce. Combine that with a regular bottom cleaning schedule, and you have created a manual economy mode that does not require any electronics at all. Yet even with a clean hull riding at a good angle, many boats are carrying a silent penalty that sits under seats, in lockers, and even in the bilge. Fixing that does not require tools, just honesty about what you really need to bring. Number 3. Getting serious about weight and balance, not just horsepower. When people talk about performance on the water, the conversation almost always circles back to engine size. Horsepower numbers dominate the dock talk, while a quieter factor gets ignored: what the boat is carrying every time it leaves the slip or ramp. Over months and seasons, weight accumulates without much notice. Extra lines that never get used, anchors meant for different conditions, coolers that stay empty, containers of supplies that were just in case last year and never removed. All of that mass has to be lifted out of the water before the hull can run efficiently. The more weight the engine has to overcome, the harder it must work just to get the boat onto plane. That means more throttle, higher fuel flow, and longer time spent in the least efficient speed range. What often gets missed is how balance amplifies the problem. Weight stacked aft pushes the stern down and forces the bow high, increasing drag. Too much weight forward can cause pounding, which leads drivers to back off into inefficient speeds. Then there is the weight you do not see. Water trapped in lockers, moisture pooled in the bilge, live wells left full after the last trip. These hidden loads quietly add hundreds of pounds that never appear on a checklist. Owners who take the time to empty compartments, dry areas that should not hold water, and reload only essential gear are often surprised by how different the boat feels. The payoff is measurable: reduced planing speed, lower throttle to maintain cruise, less strain across the entire operating range. Fuel prices stay the same, but consumption drops because the boat is no longer carrying unnecessary mass. That said, not all added weight is wasted. One particular addition, when used correctly, can actually reduce fuel use rather than increase it. Number 2. Letting a small helper engine do the slow work. Anyone who spends long hours trolling, idling through structure, or following contours knows that low-speed operation adds up fast. Many boaters do all of this on the main engine because it feels convenient. The motor is already there, already running, and capable of moving the boat at any speed. Over time, though, that convenience comes with hidden costs. Large 4-stroke and modern 2-stroke outboards are optimized to make power. They are happiest when operating under moderate load. Extended periods at very low throttle settings can lead to inefficient combustion, carbon buildup, and uneven running. Fuel consumption during these hours is also higher than many people expect, simply because a large engine is being used to produce very little thrust. This is where a small auxiliary engine quietly changes the equation. A modest unit mounted at the stern, roughly in the 10 to 15 horsepower range, is well suited to slow, steady movement. When used for trolling or long idle stretches, it burns a fraction of the fuel the main engine would consume for the same task. Over a season, the savings add up quickly. Experienced guides and anglers have relied on this setup for years. They use the primary engine to travel efficiently at speed, then switch to the smaller unit once they slow down. The result is fewer low-load hours on the main engine and more consistent, gentle use of the auxiliary. The benefits extend beyond fuel. The primary engine accumulates hours in conditions where it operates cleanly and efficiently. The auxiliary takes on the slow work it was designed for. In an unusual twist for boating, adding another engine can actually lower overall operating costs. Even so, many owners never realize how much fuel they are saving or wasting, because they are still relying on feel instead of data. That final piece is where the biggest insight comes from, and it has nothing to do with the pump itself. Number 1. Watching gallons per mile instead of just the price per gallon. Most conversations about fuel start and end with a single number on a sign. The price per gallon becomes the entire story. The trouble is that you cannot control that number. What you can control is how many gallons you burn to travel a given distance. Without real feedback, that is hard to optimize. With the right information, it becomes almost a game. Modern outboards and many aftermarket systems can display real-time fuel flow and efficiency data. That usually means some form of fuel sensor feeding information into a gauge or multifunction display, showing how many gallons of fuel per hour the engine is using and how many miles or nautical miles you travel per unit of fuel. The instant you have that on the dash, small changes in trim, speed, and load stop being vague feelings and start showing up as clear changes in numbers. What most owners discover is that their boat has a sweet spot, a narrow band of engine speed where the hull is comfortably on plane, the engine is not working unnecessarily hard, and the distance per gallon is meaningfully better than it is just a few hundred revolutions per minute higher or lower. Without data, that spot is easy to miss. With data, you can see it appear on the screen, lock it in your mind, and get used to how it sounds and feels. Over a season, allowing that feedback to influence how you run the boat can easily save a double-digit percentage of your total fuel consumption. You will still have days when you choose speed over economy, and that is fine. The difference is that you are making that choice consciously instead of wasting fuel simply because you never knew there was a more efficient way to travel with the exact same equipment you already own. Fuel prices will always move up and down, but the way your boat uses fuel is something you actually have control over. Small choices in how you fuel, store, and run your engine add up faster than most people realize. If this helped you spot even one habit worth changing, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss more grounded, real-world outboard breakdowns. And drop a comment below which of these changes do you think will make the biggest difference on your boat this season, and why?